Hi.
So basically what we just wanted to do was just give like an overview of just how we've come to where we are, because it's quite of a long, well, we're not going to try and make it long, quite an adventurous story. Yeah.
Yes. So a lot of you can see where we are now, today. We're not getting married today, as most of you probably know, because we got married about a month and a half ago in a place called Gibraltar, which is a really weird place that we'll talk a bit more about. But you can see us here today and think that maybe it was an easy journey to get here, and it absolutely wasn't. So we just wanted to fill you guys in a little bit about how good God has been, about how He's brought us to the point that we are, and we can absolutely say that we would not be here if it wasn't for God's goodness and for friends and family who have supported us along the way.
We're just looking for a picture from New Zealand.
Well, that works. You can still, the big pictures is the one we're looking at.
I just want to point out that the guy hiding behind Samuel, that's Jesse right there in the bow tie and white shirt. Because he also came to New Zealand, and Christine beside him did as well. She's just not in the picture.
Yes. So, on the 31st of January, we met at Cape Ray, New Zealand, which is a little Bible school on the other side of the world at the bottom. And we overlapped for about 9-10 weeks of term time, and we were friends during that, but there was always like, is there going to be something more, is there not, I don't know.
So I actually thought he didn't like me. I thought he liked someone else. So I went home kind of being a little sad.
I didn't like someone else, to be clear, but it was one of those things where it's like, I don't want to leave this person on, she is on the other side of the world, I don't like it, so, but anyway, we got through that. And then I visited her on the way back from New Zealand, so I flew the other way around the world to get back home to England, which is where I'm from. And so I visited Julie and her family for about a week in Cornell, shortly after they moved. And it was a time when I realized that these guys were crazy, but that they were also amazing and huge fun to be around. And you know, it was you see this girl that you like, and then you visit her family, and then you're like,
I don't want to see her anymore.
Potentially, but that's not what happened. It was actually the opposite. It was like, I love her family, like they're really cool, and it was that then led me to come back for Christmas. Later that year.
Yeah, so we weren't actually dating yet, but he still came for Christmas.
Yeah.
And then he came outside my door and asked if I could be his girlfriend. So that was December 17th, which also happened to be my birthday, and KFC Christmas party. So we had a whole huge day that day.
Yeah. You can take notes. You may get some answers from the pop quiz if you listen carefully. So that began a 1.5-year relationship. Mainly over long distance, and it was, at times there were 6 months where we didn't see each other, and it was fine for the first 2 months, 3 months, and then it hit month 3, month 4, month 5, and it was very, very difficult because we're stuck with video chats and handwritten letters and texts. And
which sound romantic, but over 6 months, it's really not.
Wouldn't recommend it, to be honest, if you can avoid it. But then, when you have two people on the opposite sides of the world, someone has to do something. Someone has to move to the other person eventually. But it just felt like such a big thing. It's like, I can't move unless this happens, and then this happens, and then I need this security in order to move. And while talking to my dad about this, about a year ago now, he said, Samuel, just take it step by step. Don't worry about 3 steps on. Don't worry about what's going to happen next year. Just take 1 step and trust God with that, and He'll open up the door for the next step. And in July, that's what we started to do, July this year. Julie and Amy Lynn were going to visit us in April this year, but can anyone guess why they weren't able to do that? I said no. Because Gary said no. No. It was because of the virus, and travel becomes difficult.
Yeah, so during this visit we were actually going to get engaged. And so it was even more disappointing because that was going to be our next step. But COVID.
Yeah. So then we had to wait. At the point when Julie came, it was nearly 7 months since we had seen each other last. And we were going through a really tough time relationally. Like, I was struggling with depression, Julie was really overworked, and it was to the point where Julie was going to visit, and I thought, okay, we're either going to get engaged this visit, or we're going to break up this visit. It's like that sounds terrible, but it was so strained at that point, just because we hadn't seen each other, we were in dark places separately, and it was just really difficult. But we had to quarantine with each other for 2 weeks, which could be a disaster, or it could be great. And thankfully it was the latter. We realized that actually all of the difficulties that we were facing were because of the long distance, because of that strain and that separation that we were facing. And actually in person, it kind of worked. And so, yeah. And so that is when, a couple of weeks later, we got engaged. And I asked you to be my wife, and you said?
I said yes. Which wasn't today, but that's okay.
Wasn't today. No. Yeah, and so we got engaged, and then my dad asked us a question. Actually, before we got engaged, my dad asked us, okay, why don't you get married here? And we're like, wait, no, because Julie leaves in like 4 weeks' time. How can we get married in 4 weeks? And
we weren't even engaged yet, and he was like, why don't you get married here? And we realized England wasn't actually doing weddings at that point either. And I would need a special visa, and he was like, no, that's not possible.
yeah,
And so you asked the next question.
which was?
That's why you made that face.
Yes.
Yeah. So
That's
the
how
next
it
one
was.
was, why don't we find a different destination?
Yes.
And so Samuel Googled easiest places to get married,
Yeah.
and Gibraltar came up.
That's literally how we got married. I Googled easiest places in Europe to get married. Gibraltar came up. I was like, okay, let's do that.
Yeah.
So then I just emailed Gibraltar being like, hey, this is our situation. Can we get married? We're not engaged at this point because we're still in quarantine, and I didn't want to propose in our back garden because that would just be a bit sad. But we were working towards this with Gibraltar, which is basically Spain, but it's owned by the UK. It's a weird thing left over from sort of colonial past, but it's still British. We still use like pounds, and they still like the Queen.
Still like, yeah. What's important?
Yeah, exactly. So then, eventually we got engaged, and then we were putting together this application for Gibraltar, because they needed so many different things, right? We needed birth certificates, we needed identification, we needed evidence that this and that and whatever, and we had this huge thing where we had to try and find Gary's birth certificate, and they had to dig through boxes, and then we had to find Evelyn's birth certificate and dig through boxes, and then we sent it to Gibraltar, and they said, nope, we need Julie's birth certificate.
So I needed a new birth certificate, so we had to fast order track one and hope it arrived in time.
Yeah.
And it actually arrived the day we got engaged.
And it was just remembering step by step, right? It was, we don't know how this is going to work, but we're going to trust God with one step. We got engaged. That afternoon, the birth certificate arrived. And that opened up the door to being allowed to get married in Gibraltar. Although that was still a long way from getting anything confirmed. Yeah, so at that point, sorry, there was silence. That was apt, actually. There was silence from Gibraltar at that point. We sent everything we needed, and we had nothing. And we were trying to get married in 2.5 weeks' time. And we couldn't book tickets, plane tickets, because nothing was confirmed. We couldn't book hotels, nothing was confirmed. And there was just silence. And we were thinking, oh no. And then we decided, okay, maybe we need to look elsewhere, because Gibraltar's just not doing anything. So we decided to look at Denmark instead.
That was the second easiest place to get married in Europe.
Going down the list.
Yeah. So we applied for Denmark, we had a video chat with them, it was all free, and then we ended up paying quite a lot of money for them to do it. And after that, the next morning, we heard back from Gibraltar with a date and time.
And then I think it's very easy to hear that and go, why didn't we just wait another day? Like, it would have saved so much, it would have saved some stress, it would have saved some money. But actually, again, talking to my dad, who's kind of like the voice of wisdom that's not God, but is sort of like second in line.
He's a pastor.
He's a pastor.
Yeah.
But he said, look, think about it like this. Maybe this is just God's wedding gift to you, right? Many couples never learn how to wait on God and to pray together for something. You guys maybe you messed up this time, yeah? But now, you can learn from this, and next time you have a big decision to make, pray about it for more than 5 minutes. You know? Think about it, pray about it, ask other people, fast, pray, do what you have to do to seek God, and not just make a decision off a whim like that. But even in that mistake, God was so gracious, because I was talking to my dad on the phone, and my grandmother was in the car with him, listening, and she overheard the whole conversation, and then that very evening sent me through the entire cost of all the lawyers for Denmark, plus extra. So even our mistake was covered financially by my grandmother. And that was just God holding us like that, showing, yes, you can make a mistake, but I'm still not going to let you go. And that was just really encouraging for us. So after that, Gibraltar got back to us with a date and a time, and we booked tickets and a hotel, and we went to Gibraltar about 5 days later.
Yeah, so it was all very last minute, but we all booked it in basically one day.
But because it was super last minute, we hadn't planned anything for Gibraltar. So we got there, and we were like, okay, now what? Right, we're getting married in 2 days' time. We have a civil ceremony booked, but that's like copying a couple sentences, signing your name, 5 minutes, you're married officially. We wanted something a little bit more than that, right? We wanted a spiritual side of things. And so we wanted a spiritual ceremony as well as a civil one, but we didn't have a place to hold the spiritual ceremony.
So you can understand, as a bride, not having a place, I had my wedding dress that I sort of brought, that wasn't really my wedding dress. I had this whole idea that we'd have a wedding in Canada, so I was very stressed, and it was the night or the day before, and we still didn't have a place to have the wedding.
And we were having a little meltdown on the beach, which was lovely, you know, the Mediterranean, warm waters, but we were having a meltdown.
Yeah.
And then I got a phone call from my mum, data roaming, and she said, so Dad and I walked into this Methodist church, randomly. There was a cafe in there. We said, oh hi, our son's getting married tomorrow. Can we use your cafe or your church building for half an hour tomorrow morning? And they were explaining this to the person behind the counter, and sitting in the cafe was a member of the church who had her pastor's phone number. So she gave the pastor of this church a ring. She explained the situation, and the pastor said, yep, that's fine. These strangers can use our building tomorrow, and guess what? We'll even close the cafe for the half an hour that they need it for. The day before it was supposed to happen. And when we heard that, it was just such a relief, such a lift off our shoulders. It was like, okay, we've been stressing about this, but God had a plan. And it's actually really poignant, the fact that we got married in a church cafe, because as some of you may know, we're heading to Kelowna in a few days' time to be part of a church plant, and the church plant is actually beginning from a cafe. And so we just felt that that was prophetic in some way, that we didn't plan this at all, but God said, yep, you're going to get married in a cafe, with a church cafe, and then I'm going to send you to Kelowna to plant a church starting in a cafe. And that was just something that we could never have planned. And so that happened, and then the civil ceremony happened, and it all kind of worked out without too much hassle.
Yeah, and then one of the pluses was that the place had Wi-Fi, and so because my family weren't there, we were able to video chat as well, and that was hugely important. Like, it wasn't necessary, but it was just another way of like God saying, yeah, your family gets to be included.
Yeah. And then we left Gibraltar the next day, and then I had 2 days to pack all of my belongings into a suitcase and hand luggage and get ready to come to Canada, which is definitely easier said than done, especially during COVID, when you come up to the airport and you go, hi, the app didn't let me check in because I'm not Canadian. Can I check in? And then he goes, nope, I can't let you on this flight. And I go, no, but you can, because it says on the website that I can. And he goes, And then he goes through all the things, and he asks me questions, and about 20 minutes later he's like, yes, okay, I can check you in. It should be okay. Because we didn't have a marriage certificate. Because Gibraltar takes 10 days to process it, and we got married 2 days before. So the one piece of documentation that we needed to prove that we were married, because of COVID, the only reason I'm allowed to be here today is because I'm married to a Canadian citizen. It's not a green card marriage, I promise. It just happens like that. And we didn't even have that. So we got a piece of paper that from the Gibraltar government that say, these two people are married, trust us, signature. So it was official, but not that official. And so we showed it to the person at the airport. He said, yeah, that's fine, okay, let you through. And then we went through, and then as soon as we were about to board the plane, the lady was like, can I see your passport? And I gave it to her. She's like, this isn't Canadian. I'm like, nope. But I'm still allowed on. Look at the paper. She's like, okay, we'll let you on. So I got onto the plane. I was like, okay.
Yeah, that was when we got to actually breathe. It's like, okay, we're at least on the plane.
For 9 hours before we got to Canada and had to go through their border security. Long story short, I was let through.
As you can see.
As you can see,
yeah.
praise God. And then we went to quarantine, which was fine until Julie got COVID symptoms, and then we had a little freak out, but it was fine, because she tested negative.
I was negative, just to clarify, yeah. I am very negative.
But even the testing process, you know, the car had a broken window, we almost got stuck by a 4x4 track, trying to get to the testing facility. It was a blast.
Yeah.
It was fun. But then out of quarantine, that takes us to Kelowna. We went to Kelowna to try and figure out what we were going to do when we got there. And I thought, okay, we're here for 5 days. We'll figure out, you know, maybe we'll find a basement suite, but I doubt it. Julie can send.
Look out the area. That was kind of the plan.
Yeah.
And then we got there.
And then.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Okay, so we were staying with Nate and Taylor, who were the youth pastors here a while ago before they moved to Kelowna. And he said to us, why don't you look for jobs while you're here? So I handed out resumes the next day, and I was offered 2 jobs, and we found a basement suite the day before we left.
And the basement suite wasn't even us, like, finding a basement suite. Because we had like looked at hundreds of basement suites. We had visited about 6 or 7 during that week. Some were fine, some were not great, some were okay. And we were like, okay, we'll probably settle for this one, but nothing was confirmed. And then the day Julie got both job offers, Nate called us saying, hey, my co-worker has a basement suite in exactly the right spot that you need to be for the church plant, under your budget, with everything included. Can you come and see it this afternoon? And we were like, yes. So we drove down there, and it was perfect. Everything is included, under our budget.
And signed the papers the next day.
Sign the papers the next day.
Yeah.
So even when we tried to like, okay, we're going to find this, we're going to find that, God was like, no, I'm not going to let you do this yourself. I'm going to gift you this basement suite, because you're not going to try for it. And it just shows that how it's step by step. We needed to do one thing, and then God, it's, you know, that whole, you take one step towards God and He takes 2 steps towards you. It was that kind of thing, and it has been that sort of thing for the last year. And then a few days ago, our marriage certificate came.
Yeah, so he can finally apply to stay in the country and not get deported soon. So that was a huge relief.
Because it was a ticking time bomb, because I have 3 months before I need to leave, unless I apply for special stuff.
Yeah.
So we're not out of the woods yet in terms of trusting God. We never will be. We've had to trust God with this, but we know that we'll have to continue to trust God for Kelowna, for whatever's past Kelowna, in our marriage and going forward. But I think recounting this story, there's just a verse that sticks out to me, and that's Proverbs 3:5-6, which says, trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He shall direct your path. And I hope that our story can be an encouragement to you if you are struggling, if you don't know what to do next, if you think, if you know what to do, but you're afraid to do it. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will direct your path. Trust in Him with all your heart. And just because you think you know best, you probably don't, because He does. And so we're just here to testify to God's goodness in our lives and to encourage you to also trust God in whatever you may be facing, whether it is something massive or something small.